This is the second part of chapter 2. My video, my camera quit working on me, so I'm picking up. This is from an excerpt from a letter from Lincoln to Henry L. Pierce in 1859. Lincoln says, "One would start with great confidence that he could convince any sane child that the simpler propositions of Euclid are true, but nevertheless he would fail utterly with one who should deny the definitions and axioms. The principles of Jefferson are the definitions and axioms of free society, and yet they are denied and evaded with no small show of success. One dashingly calls them glittering generalities, another bluntly calls them self-evident lies, and still others insidiously argue that they apply only to superior races." My words here. Note here that Lincoln calls Jefferson's principles the definitions and axioms of free society. Euclidean words. But in the Gettysburg Address 4 years later, he calls them propositions, because he knows that to some they are still not self-evident. That is, still not axioms. So now we have our first look at the limitations of the axiomatic approach, and Lincoln understands it as such. If one tries to demonstrate or prove something to another, they must begin with the same definitions and axioms. That is how Euclid begins, with definitions and axioms. Lincoln understands these things and thinks of them like a mathematician. But he realizes that the other party, particularly its southern branch, calls the self-evident truths of Jefferson self-evident lies. So Lincoln realizes that no Euclidean-style demonstration or proof will work with these people when starting with the phrase, "We hold these truths to be self-evident," because they don't hold them to be self-evident. They call them self-evident lies. As we have seen, Lincoln returns to these thoughts 4.5 years later with the Gettysburg Address. It is quite obvious that by this time, Euclidean reasoning is a habit of mind for Lincoln. As one studies his speeches, letters, and other papers, Euclidean words and references continuously pop up. I would assume that in the context of the times of the above letter, Lincoln understands that in order to reason with the Southern Democrats, he would have to find axioms with which they could agree that would prove that they are inconsistent with the self-evident lies claim. Obviously, this never happened, and then the war came. When we look at some of Einstein's work and at the more current definition of axioms and axiomatic reasoning, we will again see the limits of the process. But in spite of these limits, it is difficult to imagine a technique that would succeed in its place. End of chapter 2.